All right, I am so excited. Today I have an amazing woman, and I totally forgot, but she's actually all involved in all three parts of the triad. I know her mainly for her birth mom stuff because she posts some amazing stuff, and I love her because she keeps it real, but she also keeps it lighthearted because she's like how I feel like I am. You want to know the hardships, but at the same time, there's so much beauty that can come with it too. And she's just a light, and I love her. And I'm so excited that she said yes to doing this because I'm so excited because, like I said, she's all parts, all three parts involved, which is super like exciting. And I love it when it happens that way because I feel like they have so much to give. So if you don't follow her, go follow her. And I'll share that at the end. But I have Raquel with me today, and I'm super excited for her to go ahead and share her story. So I will turn the time over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I like to always start by saying I'm a writer and I'm not the best at public speaking. And even though this isn't public, like I'm speaking. So there's a good chance I'm going to stumble over my words. Just give me a little grace. um, so I've had kind of a lifetime original type life, which makes sense when you hear that I'm involved in all three parts of the triad. That's not super common. I've actually met one other person since I've been sharing socially that reached out and was like, I'm all three parts of the triad. Like you almost never find that. Like two parts, yes. So it's been a wild ride, and I'm always like, when someone's like, tell me your story, it's like, well, it started in 88 when I was born. Like, I mean, there's no like wow moment. Like it's all been wow. But I guess I didn't really realize it, of course, as like a teen. Like you understand that your story's different than other people's, but I don't know, like people aren't really looking to change the world for the most part at that age. They're not seeing the testimony in the life that they've lived. So that didn't come about until I was much older, but it started in 88. And my biological parents were, for lack of a better description, they were addicts, and they were young, and they were partiers, and just not ready or competent enough to take care of me at the time. Like not quite ready to relinquish rights to someone who could. Like I think they kind of fought for a long time to try to hold on, but not really put in the work to take proper care of me. So when I was about 2, my paternal grandparents stepped in and was like, enough's enough. And they went to court to get custody. They gained guardianship, and my biological mother just kind of walked away. She backed out. She was like, okay, you guys can do it. And and it's a one-sided story, let's be honest. My understanding is she walked away. As an adult, I feel like there was probably more incentive. My grandparents were incredible. They loved me so much, but they did not know how to handle her being, they were very much like blood is thicker than water type mentality. So they still tried to foster this relationship between my father and I, because he was their son, even though he was still making a lot of the same poor choices that my biological mother was making. But they were willing to shut her out and still try to get their son to create this relationship. So I have this interesting perspective, and I honestly didn't even start calling myself an adoptee until the last few years, because I never fit in any type of category. They never finalized the adoption because they didn't want to offend my father. He was really intent on hanging on to the title of dad, even though he was consistently inconsistent in my life. And I didn't find out until adulthood that that's why they didn't finalize the adoption. It was because he didn't want them to. He wanted to be dad. So they didn't. And so I was just kind of in this weird limbo. Like I was living like an adoptee. Like every and I didn't call my grandparents mom and dad. They were called, grandma, grandpa. But like at school, every Mother's Day, Father's Day, I would get the edited version of, they'd scratch out mother and like happy grandmother's day. Like, so I never had anyone to call mom. Dad was around when he felt like it. And so I don't know. It's like feeling like an orphan, no one to call mom. You're never anyone's daughter, but not having the official title, but I don't know. It's just this weird space. And I got in this weird headspace a few years ago, just trying to figure out like where I belong. Like, and it came up, my biological father passed away, and then that got my grandparents talking about like their will and stuff. And it's like, and I know it's really weird and maybe a little morbid, but it left me in the space like I'm in nobody's will as the daughter, and it just brought up all these thoughts like, what am I? And I know like labels aren't something that we should cling to, but I don't know. I guess everyone kind of feels like they want to belong somewhere. And so I actually stumbled across the term kinship adoption. And I was like, that's essentially what happened. They just didn't follow through with the last step. And so I started calling myself an adoptee, and I felt some peace in that. And so far I've not had anyone attack me and be like, you're not really, so that's been nice, because it can be harsh out here sometimes when you're sharing your story. So that's how I wasn't born into an adoption. That's just kind of how it started for me. And then because I'm sorry, everything's shaking. I live in a camper full time. We travel, and yeah, so our home shakes. My dog, all he's doing is like walking, and then my camera is like doing this, and I'm seeing it. And I'm sorry. I think I've had a lot of followers recently try to diagnose me with ADHD. Not sure. Don't have anything official. I can't stay focused. I'm sorry. I just see the camera shaking. You might have to edit this out. Anyway, so because like, and there was a lot of trauma throughout my life, like being kind of on, like my dad always being on the sidelines. And I think at this point I realized he loved me the best way he knew how, but he was more concerned with being a friend than a parental figure. And because of that, I was exposed to a lot more than what I should have been. And then I think one of the most toxic things that my grandparents did, not my grandparents, my grandmother, she constantly spoke down about my biological mother. And I mean, in the most random times, like I can remember taking her to a doctor's appointment. I would have been early 30s, and her introducing me to her doctor and saying, this is my granddaughter. Well, she's more like a daughter because we raised her, because her mama didn't want her, but we did. And it's like, oh, nice to meet you. So it's just these weird interactions. But yeah, so I grew up hearing all this negativity about, your mother didn't want you, but we did. And I think like, I really don't think it was malicious. That was her way of saying, we know you feel unwanted because your mom walked away, but we want you. Like, I know as an adult processing it, that was the intent behind it. But it was toxic, like just to hear constantly, and she never even said my mother's name. I didn't know her name until I was 13. That's when I finally got brave enough to ask. Because she was just spoken about so poorly. And what didn't register for me, even as a teen, is a lot of the things that she was bashing my biological mother for, my biological father was doing also. And so that makes kinship adoption is super weird in that way, because a lot of times you're connected to one side of your family, and because there's so many personal feelings involved, you get a one-sided story. And that's exactly what happened. So I'm always hesitant to share like what I know about my birth mother, because I know it's one-sided. However, later in life, I had siblings. She had children after me, most of which she didn't, or I think half of them she raised, half of them she didn't. but to my knowledge through them, she is still an addict and has struggled her whole life. And so I've at this point made the decision that I'm comfortable not reaching out and trying to find her. And I know that that's a privilege. I know there's lots of people that want that information and would love to be able to access a biological parent so easily. But just for my own mental health and what I've already been exposed to, I've just decided, knowing that from the siblings she's helped parent, that I don't want to open that door. So, but I didn't know all this stuff at around 12 years old. And I wondered why this, my father would come in and out, but my mother didn't want anything to do with me. And it just started to fester, as it does for some. And so I turned to drugs and alcohol. I started smoking cigarettes around 12, but by 13, I was hiding liquor in my bedroom and going to school high and drunk. And I was also trying to fill voids, like, again, and I don't think people understand this. My grandparents were good people. They were loving people. They nurtured me. I played on every sports team I wanted to play on. Like, they were good parents. That doesn't negate the loss that you feel. And I think a lot of people feel like, oh, well, if you have a good, loving home, you shouldn't feel this way. And that's just not how it works, because I did, like, my grandparents, I mean, all parents have faults. They had their faults, but they were great parents. And still, I just felt this loss. And then, I guess around that time, I started spending weekends at my father's house, and it was a party house, and he had very loose rules. I was allowed to drink and smoke weed, and I was exposed to, just in and out traffic. Now I know what that was. I didn't then, but just this whole lifestyle. And I'm like, you know what? If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. And I had already experienced, the town was not tiny, but small enough that people know your name. And especially we had a unique last name, my maiden name. And as soon as anyone heard it, it's like, oh, do you know so-and-so? And it's like, yeah, that's my dad. And they're like, oh, stay out of trouble. So, like, he had this reputation that preceded him. And because of that, it got attached to me. And I don't know, I felt the loss. I felt the hurt, the abandonment, the confusion, and then watched him live this lifestyle that seemed fun. And so I dove in. And during that time, not only was I willingly promiscuous, but I also had been taken advantage of several times, molested, and then ultimately groomed by an older acquaintance. And by the time I was 14, I missed a period and got a pregnancy test. And sure enough, I was pregnant. And I was terrified, as most young girls are when they find out that they're pregnant, and living a lifestyle that's not healthy for that type of transition. But I found out I was pregnant, and by the grace of God, it only had to be by the grace of God, I was able to just stop everything cold turkey. I know a lot of women struggle with that. It's not always so easy as just, oh, well, I'm pregnant and now it's not just about me. But for whatever reason, I was able to realize, okay, it's not just about me. And so I did. I stopped everything cold turkey and ended up taking an offer. So no one in my family knew I was pregnant. I was too afraid to say anything. My plan was to hide it for as long as possible. And after that, I know it sounds super bizarre, but at such a young age, I'm concocting all these ideas in my head, like, well, what if I tell them I don't know how it happened? Maybe they'll believe me that, because I didn't want to report the abuse. I didn't want to report, everything that was going on. And I was just terrified. And I'm like, Jesus was, conceived from a virgin. maybe perhaps they would buy that. Like, it's just crazy what all goes through your head when you're terrified. But so I had a family member ask if I could move. I think it was like 600 miles away. They were out of state. And I was like, yeah, sure, as long as that's okay with grandma and grandpa. They needed the I'm always vague with this part because it's not a part of my story that I share freely, but it's a part that's really important and I feel like it's worth sharing. But the the husband was military and was going to be deployed, and she just needed help with the kids. And so I was like, yep, I'm on board. And I can remember the entire drive there thinking, I'm going to tell her, I'm going to tell her, I'm going to tell her. And I chickened out. I never could. And it was, I ended up getting to around 3 months before I got caught. And I had got home from school and was questioned as soon as I walked in the door, made to take a pregnancy test. It hit the fan, completely hit the fan. I was being told how awful I was, cussed up and down. And it was just this super traumatic experience. And I knew at that point, like I couldn't pretend what had happened, or they discovered it through reading emails that I had sent. And I didn't realize that after I deleted them, I needed to delete them from the deleted folder, the trash folder. So like everything, because I was talking to someone, like trying to figure out how to play this off. How am I going to get in the least amount of trouble? How is this going to be the least traumatic? And yeah, so they were just like, oh no, we're just going to put a stop to it and confront. And they confronted me. And looking back, I'm so glad that I didn't say anything, because one of the first things out of their mouth was, if you were not so far along, we would force you to get an abortion. And I'm just so grateful. Like, I don't know, I didn't really discover God until much later in my journey. And now when I look back at all these little pieces, I just feel like it was his prompting, like moving me from one point to the next. Because what like at that age, you do feel forced. Like, it wouldn't have felt like a choice. And so if I would have opened up when I felt like it, I would have a whole different story sitting here. And so that was honestly such a traumatic point in my life. A lot of it's a blur. I was a freshman in high school. I can remember walking to the bus every morning. I was, of course, new in town. I just moved, and it felt so lonely. Like, kids were afraid to talk to me. And when they did, they had a lot of assumptions to make. And this is coming from the school district I'd come from, the community I'd been in. I had a reputation at this point. Not only was I a cool kid, like one of the bad cool kids, not one of the popular cool kids, but one of the bad ones. Like, I was a fighter. Like, you had anything off the cuff to say to me, it was going to end in a fight. And I didn't get in trouble at home for that. My grandparents' mantra was always, you better never start anything, but you sure as heck better finish it. And so if I got suspended for a fight, that was always the first question: who started it? Well, they did. Then you're fine. So then to go into this situation and feel so vulnerable and so fragile and so, just, I was new and I felt judged just based on my circumstances, because that's what people do when they see a young girl pregnant. They judge what circumstances led them there. They never ever assume that it could have been non-consensual. They never assume that it could be the product of something more than just, teen hormones. And I don't know, it was just a really rough time. So I don't remember a ton of it. I do remember adoption being brought up when not long after I had been confronted, and it was presented as not a choice. I was told, you choose a job, you choose adoption, or you don't have a home. If you choose to parent, you can't live here. You can't go back to your hometown because of the circumstances surrounding it were so volatile. So it was, you place your baby, or where are you going to live? And I can remember them, even because I'm questioning that. And I was like, well, what if I move out? And they're like, you can't, you're 14, no one's going to rent to you. And by the time you deliver, you'll be 15, still no one's going to rent to you. So it was just this, like, there's no option. Like, and the house that I had moved to had begun to get abusive. It was, not a safe place to be. I didn't know how bad it was going to get. But it was bad enough that it's like, well, would I even want to bring a child back here and raise them under these circumstances? And so I leaned in, and I started doing meetings with the adoption counselor and asking questions. And I tried to make it super apparent that I cared. Like, I'm not just like giving up. I'm not just, here's this child and, deuces. Like, I feel like I asked a ton of questions, and I know that I was in this state of survival at that point, but I asked a ton of questions. But still, by the end of it, the only thing I knew for sure is after placement, I would get to see my birth daughter on her first birthday. And after that, I was under the assumption that I wasn't allowed to see her until she turned 18, and that would be her choice. And at 21, if she hadn't found me, I could look for her. And they let me believe that. No one told me otherwise. No one corrected me. Turns out that's not the agreement that we had. So after placement, I just remember really just crying. I mean, for days, like staying in bed and crying. I couldn't comprehend reality. Like, I couldn't believe that that was my reality. And I did not have a very supportive or nurturing environment. I remember being told I had taken pictures in the hospital. Back then it was a 35mm that you had to develop, and I can remember getting those back, and like the binders that we had to use for school that had like the clear pouches on the front and back. And I tucked a picture of her in that pouch. And I can remember my guardian seeing that one day, and she was like, get that out of your school binder. It's already embarrassing enough that they saw you pregnant. You don't have to go flaunting it. And I just remember feeling crushed. Like, they thought like everything I did, they attributed to being attention seeking. And it's like, you don't have a clue, and don't want to. You're just embarrassed by me. I'm an embarrassment. And so it was a really difficult season. And then not long after placing, the abuse shifted, and I was also being sexually abused at home. And I endured that for two more years, and I couldn't take it anymore. And so I ran away. I had actually been going to therapy at the time, and I had not reported the extent of the abuse because I knew by law that she would then be obligated to report it, and I was afraid. So she only knew the things that I knew that I could say that wouldn't require law to get involved. And this woman was a guardian angel, because I know that this isn't on point. This isn't something that therapists just do. But I remember going into her office and saying, I can't take it anymore. Like, I want to go back to my grandparents' home, and they're not going to let me. They said I can't even go visit this summer. They're not letting me make phone calls, nothing. And she let me make a phone call to my grandparents from her office and tell them what was going on, and explain that I would be leaving without permission in a few days to come back to their house. And I know that that is not something that a therapist would normally allow. And I didn't even realize how big it was in that moment. But again, as an adult looking back, it's like she knew something. Like she knew that I wasn't telling the whole story. She knew it was really bad. And so I did. I ran away. And I was picked up as a runaway, of course, from the local police department in our hometown. And they called back to the city I'd ran from and reported, hey, we got the runaway. And the police department there said, you have to release her. We've been tipped off that her home isn't safe. At that point, people should have started asking questions. The adults in my life should have started asking questions. Why was it not safe? Why was it not safe enough that they released a runaway? But no one did, because people don't want to confront those things. It's uncomfortable. I get it. But again, like as an adult processing, it's like red flags, so many red flags, and you just ignore them and just buy the story that I just couldn't take it there anymore. That's enough to keep you content. Like, so that has probably been, that season of my life has been the most traumatic and hardest to work through. And at that point in my life, so I now have a 2-year-old birth daughter that I think that I'll never get to see again. I've been groomed, molested, abused by so many men in my life that my thought process is, I'm never going to be with another man. I will not get married. I will not have children. 1, I don't trust men. 2, I don't deserve to have a family. I don't deserve, like in my mind, I very much was sold on the idea that I didn't deserve any goodness. And God had other plans. I actually ended up meeting my now husband, and we were just supposed to be friends. Like at this point in my life, I dressed like a man. He didn't know that because we worked at Taco Bell together, and all he ever saw me in was my uniform. And then we started hanging out outside of work. And the first few things we did was like go to the basketball court, and talking afterwards, he's like, I thought you were just trying to dress for the game. And I'm like, no, that was my whole closet, like basketball shorts, wife beater tank tops, oversized tank tops, men's pants. Like that's just like, and so like I was set on, no relationships, and something about him was different. And I mean, the rest is a story for another day, but we fell in love, got engaged, got married. And before we ever started dating, because this is a small hometown, he had already heard 10 different rumors about me. And I think the coolest thing that he has ever done, he's done a lot of cool things, but we were hanging out one night, and he just came to me, and he's like, I need to ask you some things because I've heard several different things, and I don't want to just assume any of them are true. And I mean, we weren't even serious at that point. So no, I hadn't brought up the fact that I had a birth daughter, but we ended up having this big long talk. And I was like, look, I come with a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma. There's a lot of things I'm going to have to work through. Now's your chance to dip. Like, you don't have to stay. I'm not going to think any worse of you. Like, you're not getting some cookie cutter female that has lived a relatively normal life. Like, there's a lot. And he's like, nope, I'm here and I'll help you unpack your bags. So he's really helped me heal in so many ways. If it wouldn't, after I ran away, aside from deciding that I wasn't, fit for a relationship or a happy future, I was also starting to regress. I was like, if this is what the rest of my life is going to look like, I'll just go back to numbing with drugs and alcohol. Why not? And whenever we met, like, it just completely changed that trajectory. Like, I'm not going to say we didn't do anything we shouldn't have been doing. We were young and stupid, but, it wasn't like a numbing. It wasn't a, let me just escape my life type situation. And so we ended up getting married, and quickly into marriage, I wanted a child. because I went from I don't deserve a child to maybe if I have a baby, it will replace this ache that I have, this hole in my heart. And um, I learned that that's not how that works, you know? So 6 months into marriage, we did conceive and give birth to our child. And it was just this, man, it not only did I realize like this isn't going to fill this hole, like your heart expands for every child that you have, but I also realized how being a birth mom would completely change how I parented my child. Um, I was working at the time, and so I was on my maternity leave. And as soon, I think I had like a month left, and I started crying every day. I can't leave this baby. I can't leave this baby. And it was traumatic. It was, I mean, even after going back to work to this job that I had loved, I loved the employees that I worked with. I was a banker. And I can remember going into work almost every day with bloodshot eyes because, and I was getting to leave our daughter with my grandmother. Like, it wasn't like I was dropping her off at a nursery with people I didn't know. Like, I knew she was in this safe home. But I was devastated. And it really took a toll on our marriage in the beginning because I didn't want to leave her for date nights. Like, there was no feeding into my marriage at that point. All I saw was this child that I had time to make up for, you know. And that was, those first couple years were rough. And then right after she had turned 2, she was about 2.5. My husband he couldn't take it anymore. He's like, I'll get 3 jobs if I have to. I want you to put in your resignation and I want you to be a stay-at-home mom. And he did. He worked 2 and 3 jobs. He did whatever he had to do. And we were so frugal and we just scrounged it all together just so that I could stay home. And it wasn't maybe a year into that, that my father announced that him and his girlfriend they were expecting. And I was a little shocked to say the least. But we knew that they also were not in a healthy place to be parenting. And so we just made ourselves available. And I think whenever she would be my infant half sister when she was born, they asked us if we could keep her when she was 3 weeks old. And it went from, can you keep her for a few nights to, can you keep her for the week? Can you keep her for 2 weeks? And so we just discussed, like, this isn't fair to us or to her. Like, we need us, like, what's the intention here? What's going on? And we ended up going to court and it was supposed to be temporary guardianship. The plan was for them to get their feet and under them and prepare and be ready to raise this child. And unfortunately, it was one thing after another. They really struggled, and one thing led to another. And we had her for 4 years. And around the 4-year mark is when our biological father passed away. And immediately after, her birth mother had messaged that she wanted to regain custody. And of course, at this point, we were kind of devastated. Like, we had raised this child for 4 years and there had never been any inclination before that they were interested in regaining custody. No efforts were really made. And then we ended up a week later, her birth mom messaged me and said, I've been thinking about it and praying about it, and I just feel like it would be incredibly unfair to my daughter to uproot her from the only life she's ever known. And I would like to sign the adoption papers as long as you promise that she knows that I'm mom and we can keep in contact. Like, I don't want to not know her. And I was like, I'm a birth mom. Like, I get this. I get this so much, like, absolutely. And sure enough, it was just a few months before her 5th birthday, we finalized her adoption. And I've stayed in contact with her birth mom over the years and sent pictures and updates and all of that jazz. And then when our daughter turned, I think around 8, she wanted to meet her. And at this point, we lived in different states and whatnot, but we made it work. We got a meeting. I'm starting to stumble over my words. We got a date scheduled, and she had since remarried, and her and her wife had a child, and so our kiddo was excited to meet her sister, and we got to do like a big get together, and it's been, you know, it's been a process, like navigating reunion and all the feelings that come with that, and trying to respect, because me as a birth mother, I catch myself wanting to push. Like, I want her to make these connections. And my husband, like at the reunion, like he had to like pull me back because I was like, go give her a hug. Do you want me to put it on video? Do you want this on video? And she's like, Mom, stop. Like, she was getting so embarrassed. And my husband's like, you're gonna need to calm it down. So it's weird having experienced all sides of the triad and then trying to make a healthier place for our child without going on the other end of, you know, pushing too hard and trying too hard to make her step outside of her comfort zone too soon. And I think that's what I've learned most about all of this. Like, at the end of the day, like, the focus should be the child's comfort, not the adoptive parents, which has been historically the case, like what they feel most comfortable with. And then there's been just recently this highlight on birth mothers. Like, we got to be fair to birth mothers. And not that we don't need that. Birth mothers need a lot of grace too. But the adoptees, at the end of the day, like, what do they want? What makes them comfortable? What, you know, like, the door should be left open, but we shouldn't shove them through it, you know, type deal. Like, and so essentially that's been what we've tried to navigate, like finding this healthy boundary of, okay, here's the door, walk through it at your own pace. And I think overall, in any area of the triad, the best thing that we can do is just be open and honest. I think open and honest communication is so vital, and it can't be biased honesty. Like, this whole, like, well, from my perspective, it feels like, no, it just needs to be like, this is the facts. And there's got to be grace. Like, so many birth mothers are just torn apart because of the season that they were in when they had to place. You don't know until you've been in those shoes. It is not black and white. It is not just a clean cut. Like, the situations that some women find themselves in are just horrific. Like, you couldn't fathom. And then to make this decision to better the, like, and that's always the intention. And I'd actually posted something the other day and got a little bit of pushback. There's this, it's really popular right now in the adoption community to say, you cannot say that you placed a child out of love. That's toxic. It's unhealthy to say that that was a loving choice. And it was like, there was an intent behind that. And the intent can absolutely be love. If the child experienced trauma, abandonment issues, or even had an unhealthy adoptive family, that is horrible. That's a tragedy, but it doesn't change the intent of the process. You know, it was only love that allowed me to relinquish the rights of my daughter. It was not wanting her to walk back into this living hell that I was living in. That was an act of love, because selfish me wanted to keep her anyway. Selfish me wanted to parent and figure it out and, live on the streets if I had to, because I loved her so much that I didn't want to be separated. But I loved her enough to realize that she deserved a better life than what I was able to provide at that time. And so I don't know, there's just so many different nuances, and people get offended over everything. And it seems like advocating for the adoption community, it seems like there's only one narrative that we're supposed to agree with and push. And if you're outside of that narrative, then you're uneducated or you're toxic, or, you know, you're promoting these unrealistic ideologies. And it's like, adoption is so much more complex than that. Like, every single story, every person I've talked to, I had a reel go viral a year ago, which is what grew my account. I went from 3,000 followers to like 20,000 followers in the span of a month. And because it was an adoption reel, it brought in tons and tons of birth moms and adoptive moms and adoptees. And what I realized was these people felt safe with me. I felt like a safe space because I had shared my story. And I had women like in their 60s telling me their stories of placing a child that they had never told anyone because they never felt safe enough to. And all of these stories are so, so different. But the theme that I've noticed in every single woman that reached out to me is love. Like, how can you diminish that? How can you? And I think I'm full of just little tidbits of insight that I like to think are helpful. But one of the things that came to me, I've had a lot of people, when I posted that thing about love being the reason, and people coming back saying, well, you know, I've heard that's toxic. I've heard that that's not a good thing to tell an adopted child. I've heard this, I've heard that. And my answer is, sometimes love does look like leaving. Like, I want my children to know if they're in a toxic relationship, it is an act of love to leave. Bringing my child home would have been bringing her into a toxic environment. It was an act of love to leave and separate her from that. And it's just, man, it's just not black and white. It's not, you can't dumb it down like that. It's so complex. And to try to diminish the sacrifice that is made is unfair. So I think I've most certainly gotten the most pushback sharing as a birth mother. You know, I share stuff as an adoptee and as kinship adoption, and I get some pushback and some people that have nasty things to say. And when I share as adoptee, you know, I'm, you know, told that I'm part of a corrupt system, or as a adoptive parent, you know, you're part of a corrupt system, you know, you're unethical, things of that nature. But man, no one has ever ripped me apart as much as they have over being a birth mother. It's an interesting space to try to hold a platform in, but I really feel like God prepared my heart for this, because 2 years ago it would have broke me. I could have never gotten the comments that I've gotten and continued. And at this point, I feel like there's been a veil put over my eyes, and I'm able to realize, like, okay, you're uneducated. Like, you're speaking from a place of hatred because you're uneducated. So let me educate you. And a lot of times that completely changes someone's tone. And when it doesn't, and they're just looking for a fight, I just block them, delete the comments, and move on. But that's why there's not a lot of birth mothers that share in this space, because it's vicious out here. it's intense. But I don't know, I feel like there's so much value to be gleaned from every side. And I'm thankful for the opportunity. I'm thankful to be here and talking. I'm thankful for my platform. Just it needs to be talked about, because we can't ever erase stereotypes if we're not willing to talk about it.
Oh my gosh, I just love you. You are seriously, no, you seriously are such an amazing human. For everything that you have been through, there's a lot of people, they would just let that completely run the rest of their life and stay down the path. But like, I think it's beautiful. And I think there is a lot of people that don't want to admit that they didn't find God until later in their lives. Cause like I'm one of those that grew up with like, you know, we have a belief in God, but my belief wasn't solidified until I was in my 30s. Like really it wasn't. And so I love what you're doing. Like I said, you are so extremely real, which I love. And when you're real, it brings the haters out, because I have been real on things too. And people they just don't know. And it breaks my heart even more when it is people from the adoption community, like a fellow adoptee or a fellow birth mom or adoptive parents. And they're so nasty. And it's exactly what you said. You don't know the full story. If you would like to sit down and talk with me and know the full story, then you can make a judgment. But even when you make a judgment, that's, you know, that's whatever, your choice. But like, that's what breaks my heart. People don't take the time. And I seriously love that you are so advocating for birth moms, because I mean, you pointed me to Samantha, which I love her. And she's amazing. But seriously, I think it's such an important part. And for me, like meeting my birth mom, like I have mad respect for her. I think she's amazing. At first, you know, like my backstory, which most people know, like, I mean, I was one of 7 that was given up smack dab in the middle, and she continued to have more kids. And for me, I could have been like, why? Like, that's disgusting. How could you? How dare you? Like, why only me? Which I know there's a lot of adoptees that do that. But for me, I had to be like, once I got to know her and to know her heart and to know the intention, like I love her for that. And like you said, adoption is love. For people to say it's not, it really infuriates me, because it's like, it doesn't even have to be adoption. Like if I am willing to take somebody dinner because they've had surgery or they're sick, it's because I hate you? No, it's because I care for you, and there's a place in my heart that I love you and I want you to be better. And so I'm going to bring you a meal so you don't have to worry about getting off your butt and cooking dinner. You know what I mean? It goes with everything. Anything that you sacrifice for somebody, it's 100% out of love. It's not because, and so I love that you brought that up, because I feel like that has been such a huge thing right now. And it's just like, all y'all don't know, like, you don't know, you can make assumptions. And it breaks my heart even more when it's people in the adoption community. It's because something has happened really bad to them. And so all I do is honor them, pray for them, and just hope they can find some peace with it. Because you know, I think we've all been in a place where we've been angry and we've been hurt, and we know how much that does not help us move forward. And so, but it's like they're, you know, they have to work through it. Nobody can force them and be like, you have to be like done by this time. And so, but that's where it's hard, because I just want that for everybody to move forward and to be like, you know what, I need to heal from this, but it's got to be on their own time. So, I just love you. Seriously. No, like seriously. And if you guys don't follow her, go follow her, because she 100% is real. And that's what I love about her. She will post controversy crap, and girlfriend just knows how to be like, hater, bye hater, bye hater. Like, it doesn't mean that things don't still, you know, sting, because they do, but like, I just love you, and your family's adorable. And I think it's so cool that you guys travel. I just love it. And I love that you were able to take some time and sit down with me, because I know you're busy, but like, seriously, keep on doing what you're doing. You're amazing. And thank you for sharing your story with me. Like, there were so many times that just my heart goes out to you. If I could, like, when I meet you, this is what I tell every person, even though I've interviewed like 50 people, when I meet you, I will hug you. So seriously, any other thoughts or anything? I mean, you seriously shared so much wisdom, but any advice you would give to, let's do this, since mainly your platform's like birth moms, any advice you'd give to birth moms?
You got to have grace with yourself. I spent a lot of time hating myself, thinking that I was a terrible person for doing what I know was the best thing to do at that season of my life. And I think right now I'm actually, I'm writing a devotional for birth moms that I'm going to publish soon. And so I've been working through that, and I'll lead you with this. I really feel like God just gave me this thought, and it is Jochebed's prayer. And Jochebed was Moses's mother. And that was a sacrifice of love. She didn't leave her baby in a basket by the river because she didn't love him. She left him there to save his life, to protect him, to keep him safe. And we read that story, like people that, go through the Bible, you read that story with so much love and admiration of, oh man, I can't imagine what it took to do that. Let's apply that to the women in our lives that have placed a child. Let's apply it to ourselves. As as a birth mother, how can I read that story and just weep with the sacrifice that took, and then tell myself that I'm good for nothing, because I wasn't stronger. I didn't make a better choice. And so I think we have to have some grace with ourselves, and you can't. I think the most toxic thing I've ever done is the what ifs. Because I met my husband 2 years later. Like, what if I would have pushed through for 2 years and then he would have been an incredible father for her? Like, I've really ripped myself apart trying to play that game. And my husband always reminds me, he's like, every movie I've ever watched, if you go back and you change one thing, he's like, changing that one thing, you may not have met me. You may not be at this part in your healing where you're at. Like, you guys could really be struggling together with no one to lean on. And I don't know. So I think, one, have grace with yourself. Two, you got to get out of your own head. We can't change the past. All you can do is move forward. And I think that's what hope is. Hope is the belief in what you can't see. It's a belief in the future, not where you've been. Hope is looking forward. And I think that you have to hold on to hope if you want to heal. So yeah, like you said, like, these people that are hurting so much and they fail to acknowledge that love played any part in this, they're hurting and they're trying to heal. But if you can't let go of that bitterness and reach for hope, you're going to be miserable for a while.
Yeah, amen to that. I had another person point that out to me. I totally forgot about that story of Moses's mom, like totally. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so true. Like, because we were talking about the same kind of thing, like people not saying it's like not love, which it is 100%. One other thing I want to highlight on you. Thank you for sharing the struggles with being like a teen that's pregnant, because I feel like that's not highlighted enough into where people need to have compassion, because I've had so many open discussions with friends about it. Like, if it's your own child and it happens, like, and I mean, I have a daughter, and if that were to happen, I would never, like, some of these things that you went through, and it just breaks my heart. And so that's where I feel like I love with you, and I love with Samantha, who I interviewed the other day, like talking to teen girls and educating them and making it so they can have a safe space, and just, hoping they can find that one person that will be like, I am here for you. I support you. I love you. Like, let's, and that's my hope, because they're so young. And at that age, you don't know what the hell you're doing, whether you know what I mean, whether you're pregnant or not. And so you need that. And so I'm so glad you guys are highlighting that, because there needs to be, my personal opinion, more compassion. Like, if my daughter, she or ever has a friend get pregnant, we will not be shunning that person out. Like, that is, you know what I mean? It would never be, that's disgusting. How could she? Her parents are horrible. How dare her? Never. It'll be like, what can we do to support your friend? Let's be there for your friend until she decides to make the choice, whatever she makes, and whatever decision she makes, let's be there for her, because I feel like that's just kind of how my heart is anyway. But you know what I mean? Like, I just wish more people would be like that. So thank you for sharing that aspect.
Yes. Well, before I focused on adoption content only, I've talked about everything under the sun. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is having hard conversations with your kids when they're young. Like, the daughters that I parent are 9 and 12. We've had the sex talk. We've talked about grooming. We've talked about unsafe touches and tricky people and molestation. And they know at this point, one, they know what to look for. They're aware of that, but also they know that I'm a safe space, that if someone has done something inappropriate, I hope to God, and I know it's not always the answer. Sometimes there's these kids that have been informed and they have a safe home and they still feel too afraid to say something. But statistically speaking, children that know correct anatomical terms, children that are aware of what all of these things are, I forget the percentage, but they're far less likely to be a target of a groomer or a sexual predator. And so I'm a huge, huge, huge advocate for talking to our kids at a young age. And there's actually a line of books. I don't sell them, but it's this company called Damsel in Defense. And it's geared toward like pepper spray, stuff like that for women. But they have a line of books called Safe Hearts. And they have books on talking to your kids about pornography, about grooming, about siblings that are being inappropriate. I mean, all the hard topics. And I think a lot of teen pregnancies could be destigmatized and also decrease if parents weren't hiding. Like, so many parents don't want to tell their kids that they had premarital sex. So many parents don't want to talk about the dangers of being in toxic relationships and agreeing to sexual coercion out of fear and manipulation and wanting this boy to love you, and I think as a whole, a lot of parents want to paint this picture of, I was a perfect kid, you can be too. And that's not how it works. You need to be real as I am on here. I want to be that real with my kids and be like, look, this is why I'm telling you this isn't a great choice, because I lived it. And let me share with you the trauma that came with it, the soul ties that came with it. It's honesty. I come back to this all the time in marriage and an adoptive relationship and the kids that you're parenting. Open and honest communication is pivotal in laying a foundation that's healthy and informed. Like, knowledge is power. Like, let's give these kids some knowledge. It's my 2 cents.
No, I love it. I love it 100%, because like with my 8-year-old and my 6-year-old, I'm the exact same way. My 3-year-old would just be like, huh? But like, we'll get there with him. But like,
Right.
That's exactly what we talked about. Boundaries and, places on you that nobody is allowed to go there. Not even mom and dad. You know what I mean? Nobody.
Yep.
So I love that. I think that's great. So anyway, well, seriously, Raquel, thank you for taking some time out of your day to do this with me.
Yeah.
I so appreciate you. You guys need to go follow her. She's just amazing. Like I said, she's got a beautiful heart and she's been through hell and back. And she's just somebody who I so look up to and I so admire. So seriously, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to do this with me.
Thank you.